ignorant of what you're up to because you haven't discussed this scheme with me as you ought to have done. When have I ever been so easily bamboozled? I believe you when you insist that amending the Constitution and abolishing slavery will end this war. And since you are sending my son into the war, woe unto you if you fail to pass the amendment.
Seward doesn't want me leaving big muddy footprints all over town.
No one has ever lived who knows better than you the proper placement of footfalls on treacherous paths. Seward can't do it. You must. Because if you fail to acquire the necessary votes, woe unto you, sir. You will answer to me.
Hi everybody, I'm Peter Travers, and this is Popcorn, where we tell you what's happening at the movies. And there's like no bigger happening right now than Lincoln. And there is a guy named Daniel Day-Lewis in it, but he couldn't be anything without his wife, Mary Todd. And she's played by Sally Field, just pronounced the best supporting actress of the year by the New York Film Critics, of which I'm a member. And now, here is Sally Field.
Here I am.
At the beginning of just awards falling all over you, and yet you have nothing but awards. You got 2 Oscars,
Yes.
3 Emmys, God knows how many Golden Globes.
I have a few.
Is it all boring to you?
No, no. Well, no. The thing is, the thing is that the awards stand for work, and the work that I've been so proud to be a part of, and certainly Lincoln is one of them. I'm so proud to be part of this film, standing across from Daniel and shepherded by the master, Steven Spielberg, with the words exquisitely written by Tony Kushner. So to me, it just represents and supports and underlines them and this film.
In 2005, I'm in Steven Spielberg's office, and I'm obsessed with the things and the gadgets that he has there, and the Citizen Kane sled. And
yes.
He's saying, well, I'm working on Lincoln. This is 2005. And I said, who's casting it? And he said, Sally Field. That was it.
I know.
You were it.
I was it. He wanted me to play Lincoln at first.
He wanted you, and I think you could have been
thought it was
brilliant.
too short.
Yeah.
Yes, but I
I
was his first choice. But ultimately, it was a journey. It was a journey we all needed to travel. I had to eventually reconvince him that I was Mary, because by the time it actually became a project and Tony Kushner had delivered those words, as amazing as they are, and Daniel Day-Lewis was on board as Mr. Lincoln, Steven had to know that I really was Mary, and it's simply fate had to do that, because it was our time for the 3 of us to really examine not only Mary but the beginnings of the relationship you see on the screen. Because first Steven tested me, mostly because I said he was wrong. He couldn't walk away from me. I couldn't let him do it.
Good,
I wouldn't
see,
let
that's
him do
what
it.
I like. No.
And I didn't let him do it. But also Steven and his amazing generosity and curiosity. Because he said, I know you're not right, but I'm going to watch you do this. And so he did, and we tested, and then it still wasn't right. Daniel was early in his process in Ireland, and Steven couldn't invade that, so I did it alone. And Steven looked at the footage and said, I put it with some footage, old footage of Daniel, it just isn't right. I just don't see you with Daniel. So I said thank you, and the good news is I didn't kill myself that day, because then the next day he called me and said he couldn't get it off of his mind, he couldn't quit thinking about it, and also he'd sent that footage to Daniel, and Daniel wanted to meet me. And he felt that Steven should see the 2 of us on film together. So he flew in for the day from Ireland to Los Angeles.
No pressure there.
No pressure there. And I met him as Mr. Lincoln, the early stages, and he met me as Molly, as Mary, early stages. And we had this like long afternoon, like a 2-hour monologue, something long, and I don't know what we said, but it was the beginnings of us exploring.
You're improving?
Yeah. We just improved something for a long, long time. Then I thanked them for their absolute exquisite generosity, and I got in the car to drive home, and I got a phone call as I'm driving home on the 405, and it was Steven and Daniel together saying, will you be our Molly? And so I was, but it was a journey we needed to do.
We've all famously heard the stories about Daniel Day-Lewis always being in character 24/7. Does this freak you out? Or was it something you enjoyed?
I'm in character, so I wouldn't have known whether he was in character or not, because I'm completely Molly, and that's how I work. It's how I've always worked. I studied with Lee Strasberg. I am of that ilk. As much as I can hypnotize myself or force myself into some temporary insanity, that is who I am, both by the research that I'm able to do and every sort of tool and trick that I know of to convince yourself that these shoes and these clothes and this body, because I gained 25 pounds, is yours. That's how I work. But I try to hide it because people think you're weird or they think you're not friendly or all sorts of things. But that degree of concentration takes real effort. So Stephen and Daniel had created an environment that was the most nurturing, the most respectful, and the most productive for an actor I'd ever seen. I'd never had it before. I'll never have it again. Where we were just allowed to have the space as these characters. I never was anything else but that. I was never anything else when I would go home to the hotel. I was never anything else when I was on the phone to my children. It's how I've always done my work.
So your kids, your sons are used to this.
They're used to it.
Well, it sounds like you're approaching your whole career. I mean, you're studying with Strasberg, you're doing this. I'm trying to think of certain movies that I would hate to think you always being, you know, even when you were the Flying Nun, you didn't try flying, you didn't jump off anything,
I didn't, but oh no. But boy, they tried to kill me more times than I can tell you. But I started studying with Lee when I was doing The Flying Nun. So it was a very odd life. I was doing The Flying Nun in the day and working with Lee at night. So and doing very weird things that I would find. And half the time I didn't even know what it was I was doing because I wasn't informed enough to know that you had to read the whole text to understand. So I would do like, you know, Sartre's Respectful Prostitute and things like that at night and The Flying Nun in the day. It was
it sounds like schizophrenic to me.
Very weird life. It was, I think, probably the only thing that sort of kept me sane in reality, because doing The Flying Nun was a depressive time for me. I wanted out bad.
But we're all happy watching The Flying Nun, and you're depressed.
Well, then you're just weird.
I'm weird. Yeah. Well, no, that's the crew. They'll tell you that. It's true. You know, I have.
That was a very strange show.
YouTube.
Oh, come on.
It was a very strange. Well, Gidget was. I mean.
Gidget was great.
Really?
I mean, it was a sort of illustrative of the kind of mores of the time, and I identified with it a lot. I grew up with that whole good girl thing, even though it's not what I was, but it was certainly what all of this.
Really? What are you saying?
Yeah, you know,
really?
I showed that in later works, but.
I kept thinking of you because Tommy Lee Jones is so great in Lincoln, and the scenes that the two of you have brought me back to Backroads.
Oh yes.
Where you're like a Backroads hooker.
Yeah. I was, but the movie wasn't very good.
But
and Tommy was having a hard time in his life, so he was difficult to be around. And my darling Marty Ritt, who was just a phenomenal soul, was ill during it. So I was like, and ultimately it wasn't a good movie, so it didn't matter.
Do you and Tommy Lee talk about it when you got back together?
We didn't really, but Tommy, I adore Tommy. What a complicated, interesting man he is. But there have been times I had met him after that where he sort of apologized and said, that was a rough time for us all, wasn't it? You know, and I really am grateful for that sort of generous gesture on his part. I was walking around waiting for this shot to begin, and I was so the character that someone outside their store called the police that there was a crazy woman looming outside their shop and looked like there was going to be some trouble, and they tried to arrest me.